an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, here we go. We are at, look at that, Wednesday, the 5th day of April. Welcome in. Good of you to join us. Now and next for Story Studio Network, Dave Trafford here. Short week because of the Easter holiday on Friday. So, programming note, we will not have an episode of your Ontario Politics podcast On the Ledge. Giving everybody the day off. How's that? Yeah. But we are going to talk today a little bit about what goes into making the decision to actually run for the mayor's chair here in the city of Toronto. And there's no shortage of candidates, some even capable, ready to take on the challenges, I'm guessing, that this city faces. And is going to continue to face over the next number of years. This is not going to be a quick pivot, quick turn in terms of how the whole matter of, standing this city back up again, dusting itself off, and taking a leadership role, not just in the region, in the province, across the country, and internationally, right? So we're going to get to that, but first, and I hadn't planned on doing this until I heard our friend Neil Hetherington. He is the CEO at Daily Bread Food Bank. And we've worked together a lot over the last number of years. And he was a regular contributor and a regular voice on my radio show at News Talk 1010. Since then, we have struck up a partnership, developing programming, podcasting for the food bank in terms of how we frame the question of poverty. How do we deal with that from an educational perspective? And we spent the better part of 18 months developing about 20 episodes of the 2030 Project. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, do it. This is a great weekend to do it. You might be traveling, might be spending some time with the kids, whatever. But listen to one of the episodes. Just pick one. And you'll get a sense of what's behind the policies that drive poverty in this country. And I say that deliberately. Poverty is legislated in Ontario. We have legislated poverty in Ontario. It's a matter of policy for the provincial government that requires people to live in poverty. That's what the 2030 Project podcast series itself was all about, was exploring that. And the goal from the federal government to reduce poverty in this country by 50% by the year 2030. That journey was to have started back in 2015 with the election of the new Liberal government under Justin Trudeau. Spoiler alert. We're not going to get there. No, we're going in the wrong direction, and you all know why. Sure, pandemic didn't help. In fact, it has been a major disruptor in any of that effort. So I was more than a little frustrated to hear the latest details coming out of the Daily Bread Food Bank. Neil and his team standing up in front of the media, telling us that right now, to say the least, they are in a critical situation, like an emergency situation. There is nothing on the shelves, figuratively speaking. That will be a literal statement about 24 months from now if we don't do something. And the stories that I saw yesterday were throwing a lot of numbers around. 270,000 individual visits to the food bank last month. 1 month, 270,000 visits. Just letting that sink in for a second. Prior to the pandemic, the highest number they had ever had in a month was 60,000. We now have more than 4 times the number of people relying on food banks in Toronto alone in the last 3 years. And there's no indication that any of that is going to slow down. None. Not one iota of evidence to suggest that's going to slow down. So, this has almost become an existential issue on so many levels in terms of support for families and individuals who need it. And I got news for you. If you think for a second that this doesn't apply to you or your family, you might want to think again. Because roughly 210,000 visitors are new to the food bank in the last 3 years on a monthly basis. How did that happen? Well, just look around. The pandemic hit at the heart of the economy. We're still seeing inflation at extraordinary levels, relatively speaking, and nothing indicates that any of that really is going to change in the short term. So if you are on the edge with a precarious job, chances are pretty good that the food bank is in your future. If you are in an industry, I don't know, could be anything. I'm thinking a lot of people who work in media. If advertising dries up because we have recession, that's going to hit right at the heart of everything that's going on in media right now. So good paying jobs disappearing. Yeah, does it sound drastic and dramatic? You bet. There are going to be people and might be you who end up having to rely on a food bank because you can't rely on your job and you can't rely on the government to help you. In fact, 33%, 1 in 3 clients at the food bank have full-time jobs. Full-time jobs. Yeah, hands up, right? It's a little worrisome. Neil Hetherington, as I said, spoke to the media yesterday at the food bank headquarters here in Toronto. And this is his call to action.
We are requesting, we are demanding, we are asking the province to come together and to provide the same emergency assistance that was provided to every single person on social assistance throughout the pandemic now. While food inflation is north of 10%, we need the Ontario government to come together and provide these payments immediately.
Right now. The weak, lame-ass comment from the government, and it was the same email that went out to every media outlet that covered this story yesterday, was, we pat ourselves on the back because we increased the ODSP back in, as an election promise. That roughly turns into about $50 a month for somebody who's on a disability pension. And in this city, it's less than $1,300 a month. That's the legislated poverty that we have here in this city alone.
A single individual on Ontario Works receives a dismal $733 a month to survive on, the exact same amount as in 2018. A single individual on disability is receiving $1,229 per month to survive on, some $900 below the poverty line.
$900 below the poverty line. And that's more than you get if you were on welfare, and hasn't changed since 2018. The inflation rate between 2018 and 2023, 16.6%. 16.6%. These people are falling deeper and deeper and deeper into poverty. And the government patting itself on the back saying, well, we put $8.5 billion into, social services and social assistance and social support. That is $8.5 billion of the $33 billion it costs us to support poverty in this province every year. Every year. The governments of the day at Toronto City Hall, at Queen's Park, on Parliament Hill, have ignored this. It has been willful ignorance that has brought us to this place. It's not new. It's only highlighted and exacerbated because of the pandemic. We now have more than 250,000 visits to the food bank every month, and a third of the clients have full-time jobs. How did we get here?
We got here because we decided that we were not going to make investments in affordable housing. We got here because we chose to legislate individuals to live in poverty through income supports that are abysmal, through disability and through OW. And we got here because right now precarious employment is rampant, and an individual who is working full-time still can't make ends meet.
We've refused to invest in affordable housing. That has been an issue not just around the corner, not just because of COVID. It's been the better part of 15, 20 years. Certainly in this city, affordable housing has been the top of the agenda. What have governments done? Sweet fuck all. You're way behind the curve on this. The Star reached out to the federal government, interviewed Federal Families Minister Karina Gould. I'm quoting from the Star now, called the rise in visits to food banks very concerning, really. But said, quote, the federal government has stepped up in a really big way to support our most vulnerable Canadians. The grocery rebate announced in the budget, for instance, will help 11 million people, said the minister. Adding, for the folks who are going to receive this, it makes a big difference. No, it really doesn't. It does not. You've already got a full-time job. A third of the people can't afford it. The other 66%, yeah, okay, they're already so far in the hole. They're not even close to the poverty line. She also said, quoting from the Star, the federal government's, get this, climate action incentive payment could amount to about $400 a year for those living in Ontario. And the Canada Child Benefit and Canada Workers Benefit are also putting money into people's pockets. Last July, the old age security pension was permanently increased by 10% for seniors over 75. And next year, an automatic tax filing will help vulnerable Canadians access credits. What a bunch of horse shit. You need a bloody accountant to figure all that out. Where is the money? I love this one too. Quote from the minister, families who have children in licensed care, now in Ontario, they are saving between $6,000 and $8,000 a year on the cost of childcare. That is helping with the high cost of everything. I've spoken to families right across this province for whom it has made a world of difference. And while high rent costs are concerning, the federal government is making massive investments in housing, she said, noting the recently announced Housing Accelerator Fund will remove barriers to build affordable housing. I don't know what you say to that. 16.6% is the rate of inflation since 2018. And that's the answer you get from the feds. Really? How many Ontarians who are living off the food banks are able to say they saved $6,000 to $8,000 a year because of the childcare plan now in place? That would almost raise them out of poverty. You think people are going to the food bank because that made a world of difference in their lives? What happens if there's no food bank? What happens to those people? What happens to you? And you may not be relying on the food bank. You may not be in a situation where you have to rely on it. But I bet you that if the food bank went away tomorrow, there'd be somebody you know. There'd be somebody in your family. There'd be somebody in your office who'd be going without. And maybe too proud to ask you for support, for help. That's where we're going to be. A couple of years from now, you run out of money, you run out of food for the food banks. Then what? You're going to have full-time employed people, and more of them, lining up at shelters. And how do they get fed? Where do they get fed? I'm just asking. There's no good answer because there has been no concerted attention to this. And all due respect to my friends in the media, this was just some lousy fucking reporting on this story yesterday. Every one of you accepted a written statement from the Ontario government and regurgitated it. Line for line, it shows up in every one of your stories. Where is the minister on this? Where are the agencies that have bureaus at Queen's Park? CTV, Toronto Star, CBC, Global. Where are you guys on this story? It was all mopey and sad, and we had, oh, look at these poor people who can't barely feed themselves, and you got to come to the food bank because you got to support your mom, and all important parts of the story. But not one of you made the attempt to even knock on the minister's door. Not one. City TV said they put a call into the Premier's office but didn't get an answer back by the time they broadcast. Well, we've done all we can do here. That's not. Today, what are we going to talk about? Where's the follow-up on this story? Where is the Auditor General on this story? Where is the fucking opposition on this story? Marit Stiles, where are you? Federal Liberal MPs, where the hell are you? Leaving enough room for the crickets. The future of this city right now is being debated because we are in the middle of an election campaign for the next mayor of the city of Toronto. Poverty is the issue. You want to get it. Everything else that we're going to hear about, people living in poverty, people living on the edge, precarious jobs, full-time jobs, relying on food banks. Yeah, that's a major contributor. The lack of housing. That's a major contributor. But it all comes to the heart of it. It contributes. Poverty is the underlying issue here. And it doesn't happen to me. It's okay. I heard one commentator today only sound confused, not because they didn't understand the issue, but really having an honest, authentic, oh my God, what are we going to do about this? That's positive. Except it only rang true because the point was made that 33% of the clients at a food bank have full-time jobs. The focus all of a sudden clarified. Oh my God, if people who have full-time jobs are having to go to the food bank, this must be a problem. No, it was a problem long before that. And therein lies the bias and the built-in view of this. Well, those other 66% of the people who are having to visit the food banks, yeah, well, they either they're uneducated or they are somehow, lazy, or they don't do what has to be done to make sure that they can take care of themselves. Whatever the bias and the stigma attached to it, there it is. We're only going to worry about it now because, full-time employed people are having to go to a food bank. Now it's a problem. No, it was a problem long before that. All right, enough of my rant. I do want to get into, pick up the phone, call your MP, call your MPP. You know what? When we have the town hall meetings, let's bring that up. Whoever wants to be the mayor of this city is going to have to address that issue. It's the issue that touches on everything else they're talking about. So, all right, enough of the rant. I do want to get into why, or why would you not, want to actually take on the mayor's chair here in Toronto. All right, that'll do it for the rant. So here's what we're going to do. This being Wednesday, it's a short week, as I mentioned. We are not going to have On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast, on Friday. But what we will do is we're going to feature a conversation with one of the guys who was seriously considering adding his name to the list of mayoral candidates. And I think he would have been a really capable guy in the mayor's chair. I think he probably would be a very good mayor. He's probably not on everybody's list because he's been a little bit away from City Hall for a while. But he has the credentials. He has an idea of what it is and what it would take to run the city. There's already 29 or 30 people who've stepped into that. And so there are all kinds of reasons why. Obviously, people are looking at it. It's easy to point to the things that are wrong with the city, the things that need attention. Poverty, by the way. But it's a lot of people who looked at it and said, thanks, but no thanks. And we want to get into that. Exactly the toll it takes to make that decision in terms of how you contribute to your city. Whether you contribute as an elected official or someone from the sidelines or doing good work with charity and nonprofit organizations. But here's what the thinking was in terms of whether or not a serious contender was going to throw a hat into the ring to say, yep, I could be the next mayor. So we're going to feature that interview in the Friday feed here on Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Tomorrow, we're going to have a conversation about the Trump circus. And of course, all of that played out yesterday, and it was just glaring nonsense in many ways, and in many other respects, it was incredibly historic, the way it played out. But now we're getting to this really interesting part of this discussion and the way it's playing out, and that is to see the intersection between process, that is how the law kicks in, the politics of it, and that's always around it, and then the public relations side of it. And all three of those things are converging and colliding. And what ends up as a result of all of that, how does it change anything for the presidential campaign, politics in the United States? And quite frankly, does this mean that there will be two major presidential candidates? Or will there be four? So we're going to dig into that. That's on the Thursday edition of Now and Next. Join us then right here on Story Studio Network.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.